So when we speak also about our, let's say, former Czechoslovakia context, and when we speak more about the past, about the international Romani movement at that time, we discussed with Michal many times how interesting it is that the international movement was able to form even though there were an iron curtain and even though Europe was really divided. So did you have a contacts with Roma from Czechoslovakia, from Union of Gypsy Roma at that time? Or how do you...
I did, because for some years I represented the Romani Union at the UN and in UNESCO. That came to an end when some Roma from here, but also from Serbia and so on, came to New York. And it cost us money to actually have representation in the Economic and Social Council and in the DPI, and NGO, and then UNESCO. And I was paying that out of my own pocket because the Romani Union wasn't paying it, and were not paying it. And then they wanted to, they didn't like, I think, they didn't like the fact that I was representing the Romani Union at the UN, but I was in America and all of the activity was in Europe. So they wanted to have a new vote. I'm not sure of the details, but because of this fumbling, we lost representation. It was taken away from us. And I suspect that the people at the UN said, look at these dumb gypsies, they can't agree with each other. I'm sure they said that. And because of this internal arguing, we lost what we had. And then so many other people tried to represent us at the UN. And we don't have anything substantial that we were building on 20, 30 years ago. It's very sad.
You described something, I think, very problematic, which is, you know, internal conflicts, which at the end can lead into that we are not able to achieve the unity we need in terms of the international movement and really things we need to be recognized.
You say that on the wall outside. It's a plurality, is not... and I write about this also. When I first got involved as a young man, I was full of fire and naivete. And I even wrote, we were one people when our ancestors left India, and because of Gajah we are all over the place, but we will reunite as one proud people. And Reunification. The more I learned about our history, I know how silly that was, how naive it was. So many years later, I corrected myself and I said, we should not talk about reunification. We should just concentrate on unification, because our history was not unified. If you look at what we know now about where we come from, which is another line of discussion, because if we don't know really where we come from, it's hard to know where we're going, and it leaves our identity in the hands of other people, and that's exactly what has happened. And that is why, whatever the word is, we have to have our own word in our own language for the genocide, because then it becomes a real thing. mass murder that could be anything. And there have been lots of mass murders of Roma over the centuries, not just the Holocaust.
You were also talking about your background, education, and I would like to go back to the academia. How I can share, like, from my experience. I started my activism in local environment, and then I joined like national, and then I started studying Romani studies, and then I joined international university, and there I saw that we are not there. We are not in literature, we are not in readings, and you are feeling like such objectification, like the tokenization, explanation, how it was tough for you, because we know from your reading and your books you have made a great and huge service to us. You're very profound researchers in archives, and now you are offering proofs of slavery, proofs of persecution, how it was in the beginning, what you had to face during the defending of these books and all you have published.
The more I learned about our history, the more angry I became. I became furious, again as a raw, young person. And I got angry with all Gaje. I'm not angry in the same, I'm still angry, but I'm not angry in the same way. I think learning the details of how we have been treated, details from the outside, the slavery, more than 500 years of slavery, where Romani men and women and children were being sold, bought and sold and killed and raped. But that is history from outside. What I became more interested in, too, was our history from the inside. Well, who are we? There are so many stupid hypotheses about who we are. We come from the moon. We come from inside the earth. We're this, we're that. We're not even real. We're just made-up people with paint on our faces. But these are all stories made up by Gaje because we were not able to tell Gaje who we are. And most Roma still don't know our history, don't know what a fantastic history it is. Leave aside the persecution. Leave aside the genocide and the slavery. Imagine that a people coming all the way from India into the West, no country, complete outsiders, different appearance. The first people of color, the first non-white population in any big numbers that the West ever saw. So the persecution began very early, and it makes you stronger. You know the cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And without an education, without a country, without an economy, without an army, without political strength, look at all of this. Look what was carried, what creativity. 1,000 years. We still have our language, we still have our culture. After 1,000 years, I don't know of any other population. We don't have a holy book. It's all up in here. And we are strong. We are strong. And our children need to know that. They need to be told this in these schools where they are being told by white teachers that you're worthless. And then parents will not teach the children our language because they will say, you won't speak Czech properly if you speak Romani. But this is a kind of cultural genocide too. What has happened in lots of places, but Hungary is a very good example. If legislation over time forbids you to, first of all, even call yourself Romani, Tsigan, whatever, don't speak the language, don't dress in your traditional clothing, we'll take your children away and put them with Gaje families. Destroy the culture, but you haven't destroyed the people, and the appearance of many Roma is clearly that they are Roma. They're not white people, they are Roma, but they don't speak Romani, they don't know the culture. So there's still discrimination. You haven't gotten rid of discrimination by refusing the language and the culture. In fact, you've made it worse because now you have a same thing in Spain. The Spanish government made it illegal to speak Romani. So what's left? You're kind of in the middle. You're not part of the general population, and you really cannot fit well into the Romani population. You don't know how to behave, how to talk. It's very sad.
I would like to ask you, so it is very obvious that all the culture, which is not like the intangible culture, which is passed or has been passed throughout all the generations, like language and this everything what we know, is something for us like base from which we can draw and elaborate and go on. And we can use it also for history, folklore, everything we can construct or reconstruct. Mm-hmm. And now is like the time also in Central Europe, the discussion of post-colonial studies. We are still facing of adequate number of Roma scholars. For example, only in the Czech Republic we can speak about around 10 people having PhD degrees, because every year 90% of Roma pupils are dying in educational system because they are taught according to the school curricula for children with mental impairment. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Where is the border for the scholars of Roma origin and without Roma origin, where they can describe or where they can, or up to where they can go to describe, to make a history of Roma, or the story or the narrative, whatever, of Roma in academic environment, in academia.
This is the responsibility of the International Romani Union, which is really the only body that's truly international. It's not as strong as it used to be. And I think at the third Congress, we had these various commissions. One was Holocaust Commission, one was Education Commission, and so on. It's a complicated problem because the average Romani person, 90%, 99%, don't really care about standard language and academic things that Gaje they get funding to study us, lots of money to study us, but it doesn't come down to us. And so if you go to a mahala and talk to somebody in a shack where there's no plumbing, no electricity, no fresh water, and talk about, well, we need an international dialect of Romani, and how do you feel about that? They'll say, get the hell out of here, you know, give me a job, give me clean water, don't talk to me about standard language. These are the priorities. I would seek funding, national funding. There should be lobbying. The way it's beginning now in Romania, soon there will be a conference that I will participate in Romania, Avenemența, on reparations for slavery. You know, Romania owes Roma a hell of a lot. Roma built Romania. When they freed the slaves in the 1800s, they gave nothing to those freed people. They just said, okay, you're free. Off you go. They gave the slave owners money for the loss of their slaves, but they didn't give the slaves, the free slaves, anything. There should be pressure on the Romanian government, and there should be pressure on the government here, because the history in Czechoslovakia and in Moravia and back then was also awful, terrible. So something is owed back. That will only happen if enough pressure is put on loudly enough so that the world knows. What they do in Hungary is divide the Romani population. They allow how many political organizations, 60 or 70 Romani organizations, which scatters. It's deliberate. It's a divide and conquer policy. If there is unity, you get a bigger voice. So there should be money available. That's the first thing. Secondly, there should be an investigation into these schools where our children are evaluated fairly, because it's simply lazy to say, well, they're stupid, you know, let's put them in a school for stupid kids. The concept of bilingual education is still very new in this part of the world. Bilingual education is the way to go. That means specialists, and it means the production of books, school books for teachers with our real history, which we are beginning to put together. And the money that's been spent, I criticized even the Open Society Institute years ago And I think I made George Soros angry by saying, why are you giving money to Roma to make these little books of poetry? Why not make books of how to find a lawyer, how about birth control, how about this, that, and the other? Don't waste time with books of poetry. But so that's what I think we should do: is education, teachers, teacher training. Because most of the teachers are not Romani people. We had Romani schools in the United States. Not one of the teachers was a Romani person. They knew nothing about teaching Romani kids.
I would say in our context, there is a lot of pressure towards government regarding compensations for sterilized women. So actually this year and last year there were money paid to women and to families, even though some cases and it was problematic, and the attitude of Ministry of Health is also problematic, but there is definitely a pressure, and I completely agree with you that it's about the pressure and saying loudly what needs to be done. It needs a lot of courage. And I would say that you're very inspirational, and I would say real role model for Roma who share the idea with you what needs kind of to be done. I would like to ask one general kind of a question. What, in your view, fulfills concept of Romani culture? When we spoke about the differentiations and a lot of differences, maybe if you can relate to that.
Well, my supervisor had a diagram that I thought was very useful in our own case. It consisted of, if I could draw it, you could see it better, but imagine that everything about us, our language, culture, genetics, everything, back in history, coming down from the history up to the present day. So over 1,000 years from coming out of India. Over that time, a lot has been lost. Because even when we look at old dictionaries of our language, there are words in there that nobody uses anymore. They just disappeared. And that happens with all languages. But at the same time, while we are losing stuff, we're also picking up new stuff which did not originate with what's called the core of direct retention. So if the core of direct retention was this big back in history, it's got smaller as time goes by, but it's getting bigger because of stuff being picked up. It's the stuff picked up that makes each different group different. And one of our old words is Indani, and I like this word. Indani, Indania. The Indani is what they call in the books tribe. I don't like to call us tribes, but if you are Kaldrash or Vlach, or if you are Sinti or Manush or Romanicha or Kalo, Kale, these are Indania. How Indania are different from each other is because of what has each one picked up from the non-Romani world. So what we have in common is what's left in the core. The core is not the same for each Indani. For example, in Vlach Romani, a lot of words have been lost, and now they use Romanian words, so many. So I learned this one, Kadrash, or Lovatic kind of Romani, but my family's kind of Romani was quite different. It was more like Czech. So I know for a tree, I would say ruk. But the Kadrash, they don't have this word. They call it kash, which is wood. It's not a tree, it's wood. Or just a Romanian word for a tree. So that is an example of how we are different from each other, but we're the same as each other. If we were going to create a common kind of Romani, instead of making up words like Samudaripin, look into other dialects who may have this word. For example, in Vlach, you could say hot and you could say cold, but there's no word for warm. Warm is between hot and cold, but lots of languages have a word tenno, which means warm. The word to tell, which in my family's dialect would be me pukerau. That's gone, that word. They just say me penau. But penau means to say. It doesn't mean to tell, which in English you did, and in Czech, presumably. To say something and to tell are two different things, but Vlach has lost a good Romani word. They don't have a word for morning. They say Didinyatsa, that's Romanian, but there's Yavin. Lots of dialects have our own word for morning. But this takes scholarship, and it takes these tiny, tiny percentage of Roma who have the luxury to go looking around for words like this, when the average Romani person has far more pressing priorities. And living in America, I get a lot of my inspiration from the African-American struggle. And I can see, although this is supposedly a bad word, which is segregation, we do need our own schools with our own teachers and our own businesses. Because if we rely on the non-Romani world to do it for us, we're not in control, and they don't really understand. Gaje don't understand how we think. They claim that they do. They can write books, and one of the articles I've got is called "What It's Like to Be a Gypsy Girl," and it's written by a white man. How on earth could he write something? But he wasn't writing it for us. He was writing for his own audience. So the stereotypes get perpetuated. So I would like to see Kanchi Pamende Biamengo. Hacheres? Kanchi Biamende. No, what's it? Kanchi Pa Amende Biamengo means nothing about us without us. Don't talk about us, talk to us, talk with us. Don't just have your conferences like the Gypsy Lore Society. For so many years, there were no Romani people involved in that. It's a society about us. I mean, that's insulting. Anyway.
We also speak about the future, about what maybe has to be changed or what needs to be like conscious in order to really reach what we need. And we have this big discussion, and you touched it also, about white supremacy. It's different in United States context, where I believe it's understood widely and generally. I would say that we here very fight for basic understanding what it means, and especially with our community, with our communities, and with the fact that we really went through the very hard assimilation here. What is your advice for us and also for the future? How would you like to see the future? What do you think needs to really be done and realized, like except from what you've already mentioned?
That's actually a complicated question. When I was invited to visit with the Dalai Lama, and I went to India and sat with him, and the context of the discussion was, how does a diaspora people, like Buddhists all over the world, who are not allowed in their own place, what do you do when you are scattered to preserve your identity? And I asked him the question you just did, and he said, do not cling onto customs and beliefs that are outmoded, they're old-fashioned, they don't serve any purpose. But take those which make you strong and keep them. For example, and you can see this happening. Now, one of our strengths, and I believe it's one of our strongest strengths, is our respect for age. The general Gajikani culture does not respect age. In fact, it makes fun of age. And you can see this on television where a child will insult the parent, and then there's the laughter, which approves of a child being rude to a parent. Respect for age is something we must cling on to. Love of family is fundamental. Other things, and one example is, and this may be more the case with American Roma, who are very old-fashioned. If you're a married woman, you cover your head, dikloro. If you drop a spoon or something on the ground, throw it away. Do you still do that here?
I don't think so. I don't think so. We still do that here, or do you? Or if you drop the spoon on the ground, then...
Yeah, if you drop anything, piece of food or...
On the gas what?
The spoon.
Spoon?
Churi, fruka.
Fork. Here it is with fork in your fork. If you put fork, people don't go.
No, that's a different one. That's a different one.
It's like a ritual purity you are mentioning?
Yes, because the idea of...
yeah, you mean like the ritual, like the...
Yeah, magardipe.
Yes.
Yeah, magaripa.
Yes.
That you cannot go around because nobody will eat.
Yes, yeah. So it's... Now this is all core culture. Every group has this. But with the covering the head, what American Romani do, they still have to cover their head with something to show they're married, but instead of a whole big diklo, they just put maybe a little thing, a decoration, and nobody knows. Of course, we know, but the Gaje don't know. They just see a lady with something on her head. Now, if you drop something, if it's food, of course, you have to throw it away. But if it is a knife or a fork, then you put it in bleach all night long, and then it's clean. So you don't throw it away. So the custom is still there, but it's modified to update it.
But this is mostly among the calderas.
Yes, yes, and they are very old-fashioned. But then, looking into the future, as you lose more and more of your language and culture, you're really losing your identity, except your visual identity. This is what I was saying out there. You're still identified as a non-white person. But where is your refuge? Where is your community if you don't know how to speak the language and behave in a Romani way? So it's absolutely essential to maintain aspects of the culture and certainly the language, because that's what makes you who you are. If you become a Gajo in every aspect except what you look like, the Gaje are still not going to see you as one of them. You're still going to be on the outside because of racism, color racism. You also have this strange situation now, and I've written about this, and I've argued about this, although it's a battle I'm losing. Why do we call every Ndani Roma? Not all Romani people are Roma. Some are Sintis, right? Some are Manushs. We're not all Roma. In my grandfather's time, Roma would only mean married men, husbands. It's not the name of the whole group. It just means, and in Sinti, it just means husbands. You start as a Raklo, you get married and you become a Rom. You start as a Rakli, you get married, you become a Romni. But the whole group shouldn't be. And then it's also not a singular, and it's not an adjective. A Roma woman. You know, if you speak Romani, that sounds bizarre. But, as I say, I'm losing the battle. I call it a lazy label. It's easy for journalists just to say Roma. Yeah. But what it means is that you have these organizations now, the one in Britain, and it's called something like Gypsy, Roma, and Traveler. I'm not sure. There's been such a mixture. Why do you include travelers, who are Irish people, together with Romani people? They are Gaje. So they are being defined by behavior because they move around with trailers. And that's all. Because they move with trailers, they're all lumped together and even get called Roma. And they're not. And in the core culture, Gaje are Magarde. This is most important for Vlach Roma. But even for people who are not Vlach, Gaje are not clean. They have to behave in a certain way. It's not genetic. It's behavioral. Because if a non-Romani girl marries into a Romani family, she learns how to keep clean, how to prepare food, how to talk to men, and so on. This is all behavior. It's not genetics. But Gaje don't behave in that way. They have to let the dog sleep on the bed and things like that, which are not seen as clean from old-fashioned Romani behavior. But a lot of that is disappearing. And the language is disappearing too. And once the language starts to go, the culture starts to go. And then what have you got left? So and there are Romani people who turn their back on being Romani. They don't want to be Romani anymore. They deny it. So what choices do they have? If they're very light-skinned, you can get away with it. Although it would be a difficult thing in your own mind to be pretending not to be what you were born. But what if you still, like I keep saying, what if you still look Romani, but you don't know how to behave like one? So I don't know where we're going, and it's not just us, because so many people from North Africa and Asia and all over are dealing with the same sorts of discrimination. And so the picture is much bigger than just our own. The future is a world with ethnic nationalism, with people like Donald Trump encouraging this kind of thinking. And we've got the same sort of people here, Jobbik and others, in Europe. How do you defend yourself against that? I don't know. I don't know. But we survive. We've done it for a very long time. You cut a gypsy into 10 pieces and you haven't killed him, you've made 10 more. That's what they say.
Is there a question you would like to ask?
Well, maybe last one. I will go back to, because this is very nice how we are going through history, which is very painful, and now to the culture, and to, I would like to ask you, like back to the history, because there is I like how you then won the book, like the Paria syndrome. There is like part of a title. And as you said that you were in the beginning, the deeper you knew the story, you were angry. And the same, I think that it will have everyone. It will be like sadness, angriness, and whatever. What would you recommend how to heal? Because this learning unbiased object and really made history by Roma to Roma is very painful. And what do you recommend Roma people to us not to have like this, like the Paria syndrome, but to use it somehow in a better way for the future?
Our biggest problem is that because of history, we are in so many Indanya, and each one thinks it is the true Romani population. You're not Gaji, but you're not real either. That's because we don't know our history. So we have to know our history and know that we all came from the same place, and what makes my Indani different from your Indani is what the outside world has done. Not what we decided, but what has happened to us. We come into Europe through Anatolia, and some go north into Russia and Finland, others go all the way around to Spain. Hundreds of kilometers separate now, hundreds of years separate. Of course, there's going to be huge differences. But until we crossed into Europe, we were one. We weren't exactly one when we left India. But by the time that migration had met Anatolia, it had coalesced. And this is really where our identity was formed. Not in India, but in what is Turkey now, and Byzantium. So the message is, one, we are not so different as you think we are. The differences are not our own choices. Secondly, there is strength in numbers, and we shouldn't argue with each other all the time, because we love to argue with each other and shout and act silly, and we're only hurting ourselves. We're our own enemies, really.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to rant.
For the time you spent with us and for all the thoughts which are now like really recorded and hopefully get to the...
So, Swakana, kaite jas. How's your Romani?
Oh, very bad. I'm exactly this kind of a person, or my family really went through that assimilation. Mm-hmm. So the grandparents stopped using language when they speak to my father and his brothers and sisters. So actually, from my generation within the family, there's just from, I don't know, like 15 people. It's just me and my youngest brother who really go to the roots back. And so I try to learn Romani, I don't know, like 4 years. And it's very much influenced by the fact that I'm a mother and I work and I do a lot of things. So I know that that's how it is. Just I didn't really invested enough time to really learn proper speaking. Yeah. So how is it? That's how it is with me. And when you spoke about what's left, you know, when you don't have the language, that's my constant question.
Yeah.
And it's constant searching and constant.
But you cannot discuss certain things in English, for example. Do you have this word, chanamik?
But it's very old. I know only thanks to my grandma. But now generation they don't know.
Don't use it. Chanamik in traditional culture is what my father is to my wife's father.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is a very important relationship. It has to do with inheritance and territory and everything. There's no word for that in English. You would have to say co-parent-in-law or co-male parent-in-law. But in Romani, it's just one word. Yeah.
Or in Czech, we say like svachy. Because in Czech, even Czech people don't know today, the old word of Czech 100 years ago was like the svat. And Roma get the svachy.
Swato. Yeah. Che swato. Well, Vlach is swato. It for me would be lau.
Lava. Yeah. Svatmeda svato is in Calderas also like some they like speak with like Duma.
Yes.
Duma and svato.
Duma. But that's Russian. Yeah. I would say vrakerau. I talk.
In the Balkans, laficheraf. I speak.
Feel a word, yeah.
Yes.
Linguistics in this way is it's like great instrument how to deconstruct.
Yes.
Or again to construct our culture. You can see this historical background and this.
Yes, it's true.
It's very probability, there is high probability.
Yeah, definitely. And it is a code, you know, and I've studied actually, Czech language. So I really reconstructed Czech. Yeah, we can relate a lot to what we were talking about.
we have also one word. For example, my grandma was saying, not the kankarata. And it means like money for children benefits, kankarata. And I was really thinking about what does it mean. And with my professor, we started thinking and we found out that it is from Austrian-Hungarian Empire, when it was krankasse, like money from some, like for people, poor people, you know. And they, Roma changed some naturally, because they didn't know like German language later, and it became like the kankarata, you know. So like Romanis are the ending for the feminine of exonymum, which is like long word. So it's very nice how you can see that.
Creative. Creative.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Beautiful.
Definitely. I think that we are run out of time, even though I would like to ask like many more things, especially the past. And you've mentioned when the Roma identity kind of was formed, like not India but later. So maybe just this last thing, if you can describe more.
What we understand now is that the origin appears to have been military. If you look at the whole vocabulary of Romani language, there are lots of words to do with fighting. The word for a sword and a dagger, and so many of these words. They're words to take a prisoner of war, all kinds of words which are military. If you look at the language has two grammatical genders, masculine and feminine, baro, bari. Indian languages had three genders, like Czech, up until about the year 1000. So we talk about Old Indian, Middle Indian, New Indian, where Middle Indian becomes New Indian around the year 1000. If our ancestors had left before 1000, Romani would also have three genders. It only has two. Hindi only has two. Punjabi only has two. But before 1000, they had three. So people who say our ancestors left in the 5th century, 6th century, it's wrong. Also, the sound changes from Middle Indian to Romani show this period of time. So we can establish a date after which the migration occurred. To find the date of showing up in Europe, then we have to look at the European history, and we start to get references to Atsingani and so on, 1200 and something. So you've got a couple of hundred years between leaving India and showing up here. Why did they leave India? Well, looking at all of these military words, we have to say, well, was there any military action around the year 1000? Well, yes, there was. The Ghaznavid people were invading India over a 25-year period or so, 24 years. 17 raids that they won, almost all of them. The Ghaznavids won. The different Indian states assembled troops to try and stop the Ghaznavid invasion from Muhammad of Ghazni. So the Indian response was a mixed response of soldiers And what's important is that they weren't just soldiers. The camp followers, there are probably more camp followers, service providers, than actual fighters. That's how medieval armies were. And why this is important is because that included women. The camp followers, service providers, a lot of Indian women, as well as the fighters were all men. But we have to account for women as well. So then when we focus on that period of history, military action, what actually happened, the Ghaznavids captured the Indians and took them into Ghazna and into what is Afghanistan now, and made them fight as gulams. And gulams are slave soldiers. You are my prisoner, you will fight for me, or I will kill you. But the Ghaznavids, although they were trying to expand into India, and they won because Nepal, Pakistan is all Muslim, they were also fighting another Islamic people, the Seljuk people. The Seljuks defeated the Ghaznavids. This is all very well documented. The Seljuks free the Indians and take them on, and then they go up and defeat Armenia in 1071, which places this population now at the far end of Anatolia, at the far end of the Byzantine Empire. But the Byzantine Empire is now being invaded by other Muslims, the Ottoman Turks, who push and push and push and take all of the Byzantine Empire and pushes people up into Europe, including our ancestors. So that's what we understand. The coalescence happened outside of India when the different Indian, because if you look at where the words come from, sometimes we have 3 different words for the same concept from 3 different Indian languages. Because the soldiers came from all over in northwestern India and had to work out a military way to talk to each other, which Urdu. The word Urdu actually means prison camp, military camp in Turkish.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay.